Today on the Hustling Artist Podcast, we have Marcus Hawkins from Atlanta, Georgia. We'll be speaking with him about his hustle. So how's it going, Marcus?
It's going well. It's going well. It's a beautiful day.
It's a beautiful day, isn't it? I asked Marcus to be on the podcast today because we share a similar background, number one. But number two, I was really intrigued by some of the hustle that he has going on and his entrepreneurship around his skill set. So, Marcus, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. So it's a little bit. I like to kind of classify it into three different sections. First of all, I'm first and foremost a teacher, right? So I teach 3 periods a day at high school. And then outside of that, I own a few different companies. Mm-hmm. So I have a media business that I mainly do corporate entities, and I film multi-angle full productions of live concerts. And then I have 2 other business ventures. One of them is Soulful Baby, which we make children's songs and videos for urban kids. And then the other thing is what's called Morning Hawk, which is my personal music that's outside of me creating music for other colleges and universities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, from your beginnings into your career, how did you come to these different job changes? Because what did you start out doing when you first, I guess, kind of came out of the world, out of school? Into the world?
Well, first of all, I think it all stems from me feeling the need to help people through my abilities, mm-hmm. right? I hesitate to call it talent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to initially be a counselor. Yeah, like specifically through the church. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people don't know this, but I went to theology school. I studied apologetics mm-hmm. heavily, Greek, Syriac, all of the things, Hebrew. And then eventually I figured out that probably wasn't the best idea for my particular skill set. So I wanted to get into helping people become the best version of themselves mm-hmm. through teaching, specifically music mm-hmm. And things. So through that, I think just by necessity, as far as me having to go out and promote myself and do other things, I got into photography, which eventually led to video, which eventually led to a bunch of other things that I kind of had to work on individually as skill sets. So just like any other business person wants to diversify their portfolio, absolutely. I have to diversify what I can offer myself. I have to be my own marketer and absolutely. Advertiser and all these other things. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So Marcus Hawkins is an entity who is, can you name all the things that you do? We just I want to give a clear, for anyone who is not an artist or is not an entrepreneur, mm-hmm. that doesn't have a business. I want to give a clear representation of what it is that one person has to do to run a business or to keep an art form going.
Yeah. Okay, it's a little bit. So first of all, it's and I can kind of run down the individual things. So with my teaching aspect, I do group composition in there in the same boat.
Sure.
Right? So even though I teach at a high school, I write about 10 to 12 marching shows over the summer. Mm-hmm. So, of course, that deals with me having a lot of meetings with design teams. These design teams are all over the country. It's for a lot of schools that compete on a national level. So that happens for a large portion of my summer. And a lot of it deals with research also. So if somebody wants to do a show on some sort of classical opera, I have to go and watch that opera like 5 or 6 times mm-hmm. just to kind of get the overall idea. And then I can have my own sort of brainstorming things. On top of that, of course, I have to keep a lot of email correspondence with new potential clients. Mm-hmm. So even though I'm full this summer, what happens next summer?
Absolutely.
You know, and dealing with all of the 1099s, which is tax forms mm-hmm. for individual proprietors, I mm-hmm. guess what you can call it. So that's one side, the sort of teaching side. The other part, which is my media business, is kind of the same things. I'm always reaching out to potential clients, letting them know how I can help their business through advertising, whether it be on Facebook or other forms of social media. A lot of the stuff I do is internal, what they call B2B, which is business to business. Mm-hmm. So if you have like a copier company and you want to sell a copier to another business, they're not going to put that on Facebook. You're going to have that as an internal contract. So
Gotcha.
I make specific videos for business people to communicate to other business people mm-hmm. and things. So That's a lot. And then on top of that, with Soulful Baby, it's just communicating with a lot of my animators. Of course, I do all of the songs myself as far as production and recording and all of the backing tracks and mastering and everything. I have my own studio that's at my house in my garage.
There you go. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's constantly getting in contact with various childcare providers and all of that stuff kind of everywhere, just to kind of set it up so when that stuff kind of starts to happen, I can sort of push it out there to the people who need to see it. And then with my own personal music, I think that's just sort of an outlet for me to, express myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you a question, and you can feel free not to answer anything. But I want to ask you a question about performance, right? Where was performance in maybe your goals in terms of how you wanted to reach people with your abilities?
I think the performance aspect for me is, It's difficult to say because I love it. Like I think for me it makes me come alive. I guess the only reason I didn't name that as a form of income is I have a 10-month-old.
Absolutely.
So what I ended up doing is kind of ramping up the media business because I can do editing at home.
Sure.
So for the last 10 months since he's been born, I haven't been performing as much. Before then, I would do 3 or 4 nights a week, every single week, constantly. I mean, I would be doing 5 or 6 weddings a month.
It's like a drum set
corporate gigs.
type
Yeah,
of-
mainly drum set. And my particular version is I incorporate a lot of electronics and modern sort of sounds with an acoustic kit and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So and I sing backup when I do all of that.
See,
So-
everything. He's in a one-man show.
Oh man, it's a lot. So so I like performing. I think I don't think it's a talent, but I think the ability for me to communicate to people, even as like a sideman or a background person, for me to embody like what the song is kind of representing, just pushing energy out to the audience, I think is super important.
Absolutely. Well, here's how I want to shape this conversation. I want to talk about a little bit about your media business, about Soulful Baby, but also about your personal history, your personal trek, right? Maybe where you grew into high school, maybe where you grew into this percussion world, how you got into all that, and then some of the decisions that you had to make, some of those hard decisions that we all have to make when we're deciding, like, how are we going to make income, how are we going to make ends meet? So can we start with the beginnings of your career?
Okay, so in high school, let's back it up even further. In middle school, I was last chair at 2 different middle schools. What last chair means for, I guess, non-artist people is that I was at the bottom of the totem pole, right? So even at concerts, my parents would sometimes ask me, like, why am I just reading a book in the back? I would just show up and never play anything and stuff. So I was not that great. Now, I'd been playing drum set at my church, right? And that kind of worked out a little bit as far as the way that I heard music, but not necessarily the way that I read music off of a piece of paper. So going into my 9th grade year in high school, I was originally slated to play football, but then I changed my mind kind of over the summer. So I wanted to join the marching band and everything. So I showed up, and it turns out that I was just good at kind of copying rhythms. I wasn't good at reading the rhythms. So I kind of figured out, that's why I was last chair at both of these schools. I wasn't good at the paper part of the music.
Right.
So I spent that whole summer just reading everything I could. Right, just paper after paper, piano music, whatever, violin, anything. I had a little bell kit that I borrowed in quotations from the school. I gave it back eventually. So I worked on that particular portion, and we didn't have the most money. So I had a borrowed pair of sticks, also in quotations. I had a borrowed pair of sticks, and I would play on my basketball, just on the back porch, and I would just play until my hands couldn't like function anymore.
Right.
Right. And so I would just do that for hours and hours a day. And I think I have a little bit of an advantage when it comes to hand things because my family, they're all masons, right? That's like bricklayers and that kind of stuff. So I grew up working with my hands, and it's a huge deal for them to be able to work their tools with both hands just because of sometimes how you're positioned. Sure. So I think for me, even though I'm a left-handed person, I'm still able to do things with both hands just because it's what I've grown up doing. So I kind of picked up on the whole sticking rudiment pattern sort of things a little bit, I think, easier than some other people.
Right.
Once again, not because of the talent, because my environmental disposition, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So yeah, it was just a whole lot of work over that summer.
Can
and
we
then
just pause right there for 1 second?
Yeah.
Because I really like what you just said. Can you repeat that? Because of your environmental disposition. And what you mean by that. Because I was also a kid that played on the basketball, and it just what was there.
Yeah.
But can you just speak to that just for a quick moment?
Yeah. So I think when I say stuff like I don't believe in talent, I don't want to demean a situation, because I think that there are privileged situations, or I think that there are privileged physical situations that people may have. So my privileged situation wasn't that I had a fancy instructor or that we had a lot of money to buy equipment. My privileged situation is that my family were people who worked with their hands. We are laborers. We are hustlers, right? That's what we do. And we're hard workers. So I think that's the main thing that started to make me take off over other people who possibly had, fancy sticks and drum sets and nice sounding instruments.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, for any musician or any sort of artist, at the core of what we do is closing the door from the world and working on our craft by ourselves. And that could be on whatever instrument or canvas you have. It's your skill. It's not your tools per se.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's my basketball.
Yeah, my basketball too. But sometimes I put the sticks down and I went to go shoot. So.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I interrupt you, so keep going.
Yeah. So in high school, it was kind of the same thing. I was just known as the person who was always practicing. People got very annoyed by it. My high school band was awful. We weren't good at all, right? And even when I became like the section leader, quote unquote, it's like a leadership position amongst schools, amongst the students. I still felt the need to over prepare, So I would, even as a snare drummer in the marching band, I would learn all of the front ensemble parts. Yeah. And but it would take me a long time. And I can remember clearly like faking when I got to school, like it was the first time I'd ever saw it, when I'd like secretly worked on it for 2 hours the night before. And I'm like, nope, it goes like this. And I would take off my snare drum and like play it. Yeah. And they're like, you're so talented. And I'm like, oh, nah, it's nothing,
Just that 2 hours that you put in.
Yeah. But I never let people know that, and stuff. So I think it's through that. And then, just it just made me better at reading. And it made me just better at all of the other things. And eventually, I think I used that particular leadership position, I think, to help people out with what their strengths were. And I started to recognize as a leader, one of the things I needed to do was to train the people who are going to come after me. Sure. And then to also help sort of blossom the people who are there like with me right now. There are people who are great at handling people's emotions. Like if something was going wrong, that's not me. So I kind of delegated all of the different things. Like we had people who were great at working on the drums. Sure. That's not me either. So I'm like, hey man, can you go tune those basses? And they're like, yeah, we love it. Yeah. So, I think I started to recognize that. And then I'm like, cool, well, I kind of like this idea of using my position to push other people up and make them more confident in themselves and giving people a purpose within the ensemble, because we're all out there working and we're sweating and it's hard and things. So, that's what that was. Eventually, I think I fell in love with the sound of the ensemble. Because you become good at your one thing, but then that starts to kind of branch out. And eventually I think I started to love what it sounded like when my snare drum blended with the clarinets or when my timpani blended with the trombones and all of these other kinds of things. So I joined the choir and I, started learning how to play piano and all of these other things. And so I started to heavily consider going into music in college and possibly becoming a worship leader at a church, right? At that particular time, seems like a lifetime ago. I was a very devout religious person and things. So I was heavily considering that. So that's when I started doing a lot of scholarship auditions and things.
And so, but then that's when you made the decision to go into theology.
Yeah, well, I made a decision to primarily study music at college.
Yeah.
Right. But then over the summers and over my breaks, I would go take specific classes
Gotcha.
and things for theology. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so what school did you end up studying at for music?
I went to Jacksonville State University. It's a small college in the hills of Alabama. It's the friendliest campus in the South.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how much education would you say you got at Jacksonville?
How much education? It depends. When you talk about academic education, it's there, right? Like there were books, there were classes being taken. I think the main kind of education I got came from the students, which is why I chose that school over every other school that I was looking at.
I won't put you on the spot. I didn't get it. The education I got at Jacksonville was like back porch Weatherly Hall, no classes. The classes were given.
Yeah.
You're right about that.
Yep.
Whether or not they were always taken. So
Yeah.
But yeah, can you just speak to a little bit of the camaraderie that you experienced in Jacksonville?
I would say that's a main part of the education. I chose that school over every other school that I got all of these full scholarships and things from because of how people would just get together and drum and talk about life and drum some more and just hang out and and there's a sense of I guess kinship with the struggle.
Yeah.
Everybody realizes that there's thousands and thousands of other people that are doing the same thing that we're doing. And, I think even like the best people have a commitment to the worst people there, It's
interesting that you say that because I was really spoiled that Jacksonville was my first musical experience in college because that doesn't exist everywhere.
It doesn't.
And once you leave that environment, and I'm saying, what you just said was very profound, the best to the worst, because, I grew there. That's where I became like, everyone's like, where'd you learn how to play like that? Sitting on that back porch from those 30 people.
Yeah.
And, but when I left Jacksonville, I had expected other musical experiences to be like that. I'm like, hey, do you want to drum? Because I want to drum, and they're like, no, nope. I'm going to go work on this like excerpt. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So, it's just like it became the part of music that you do have to close the door and work on everything that's going on within yourself. But then it also is sort of toxic.
Yeah.
A little bit, in a competitive way that sort of makes you focus inward. So.
Yeah. And I think, it goes to say that hopefully, when people get to a certain point, even if folks have to be a little bit selfish and close the door sometimes, hopefully when they master that skill that they have, they can open the door and help other people achieve the same thing.
Absolutely.
And I notice a lot of people don't get to that point until they become the absolute best and they don't feel intimidated anymore to share their knowledge,
That's a really great word, to intimidated to share. Because anyone that I've been fortunate enough to be in the area of New York City and take all kinds of lessons and experience all kinds of things and the names that I would say that I would think that they would know, they don't want to help you. They're the ones that are opening the doors. It's almost like when you're in the hunt for, or when you are right next to your colleagues, we can't understand that we are each other's network, we are each other's foundation. So let's not try to push each other down. And there was something about Jacksonville that we all understood that. And that's what made it's such a great place, vibrant place,
It's hard to explain that to people.
Yeah.
About the community that's there, because not everybody's community is like that, And I think it's more so like I guess the idea that we all kind of win or lose together, So even the people who are better in the group take it personally responsible to make the people who are not so good at an acceptable level, because we hear them too. Like when you're playing, they hear the other people also.
Absolutely.
Which is something that I definitely, like when I sort of became a leader in my later years there, I made it a point to find the new people and invite them over to play with me and just to kind of pass it along.
Yeah.
No,
it's I feel like if I went back there right now today, well, maybe not right now. It's in the middle of the winter, but if I went like in a month or so, that would still be happening.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was passed to me from like Joe Fant and Braxton Wade and Brian Spring and Courtney Pullum. Like these are names that you will never ever forget.
Yeah.
Hey, hey, watch your left hand down
there.
Something. But it's just not. It's just the care. Anyway, so I could talk about that all day long. Let's talk a little bit more about your media company. How you got to that media company, and those decisions that you had to make to expand yourself. To get there.
Okay, so when I first moved back to Georgia, because for the longest amount of time I was still living in Alabama, and I was commuting to different places, over to Mississippi, over to Georgia, some to Florida, some to Tennessee, to teach a bunch of different schools, and it almost killed me. I made a lot of money, but it almost like ended me.
Absolutely.
It was a lot.
Tell me about it.
So what I ended up doing is kind of staying in one place, and since I was in one place, I took an assistant band director job back in my hometown, Milledgeville, Georgia. Whoop, whoop. So I decided that I was going to go out and start playing some drum set for some local groups. So what I needed to do, though, is kind of put together my package, like, have some videos of me playing, some recordings, a headshot, all of this stuff. And I started to kind of look around for people to do that for me, and they were crazy expensive. Yeah. So I was like, cool, I'm going to buy a camera and learn how to do this stuff myself. And I think that's kind of what got me hooked a little bit. So I went out just like with anything else with my marching career or music career. I just started getting repetitions, or what we call reps in the marching world.
Absolutely.
So I would take 200 pictures a day, and I would just borrow like, an old bear, or like something like, I would photograph a watch and mess with the light and how it hit it and how the shadows hit it and the different positions and angles and things. And then eventually I got comfortable enough to start shooting myself. And, so I had my headshots and I would have creative shots and things. And that bled over into me getting into a little bit more of some audio stuff as far as recording drums. Luckily, since I was so much into the sort of church scene, I had ran a pretty good amount of soundboards at churches and things. So I was already kind of familiar with the technical side of stuff. So I just kind of had to put a lot of those things together. So fast forward to all of this, I started shooting friends and other people just for free and things. And then eventually I kind of recognized that like every college girl gets a camera for Christmas from her papa. So I'm like, nah, a lot of people can't tell the difference between really good photography and iPhone photography. So I needed to focus more so on the video aspects because people can't just put that together on a whim, especially the kind of shoots that I do as far as offering full sound packages and multi-camera shoots and things. So I really got into that as a means of helping some of the schools that I was working with to kind of film some of their concerts,
Sure.
orchestra concerts, choir concerts. But then other people started to see it and they wanted the same things.
Sure.
So that kind of opened the door there. And then eventually for me to make my website, marcushawkinsmedia.com, for me to make my website and for me to open it up for corporate people.
That's pretty amazing. So you took your jobs that you were currently having, practiced on them, and then created a package and a product that could be marketed, basically. So these shoots are basic. So you'll do like concerts, but then also like any type of concert, not just like a band concert or student concert. Because I saw you at Vinkman's doing Rob Opit's Latin jazz group.
So yeah, I've done jazz bands, I've done gospel concerts, I've done rock concerts, I've done solo artists performing at bars,
Now are they, and this is the ignorant side of the person that doesn't know the technical, are they a lot different for each type of gig, or are they similar in approach?
It's a lot different. I would say at something like a bar or like a live performance situation, you're looking at capturing the atmosphere, right? Which puts you in a totally different game. If I'm showing up and I'm filming an orchestra concert, I'm not really showing the audience,
right?
I'm showing multiple angles of the people that are on stage. I'm showing whoever the conductor is,
Sure.
and that kind of stuff. But I don't have to cover the whole auditorium
Right.
and things. If I'm showing up at a bar, a lot of times people want me to shoot at that particular place because it has some sort of significance, right? It's kind of prestigious, I guess. So I make it a point to go out and film the outside, the signs, different sort of relics and kind of, you know, the environment. And then I make sure to film the audience also, because part of the experience, if you're watching it on a screen, is to get the reaction of the people who were there. Like it makes you feel pulled into the performance and things. So, yeah, it's a little bit different. I don't have to worry about sound as much because a lot of times I'm taking a direct feed from the soundboard.
So the main thing that you're trying to capture is the video, what's happening in the space,
Yeah.
so that you can recreate that for one product.
Yeah. And then, and it is a lot more moving around there, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm filming, I guess a classically based concert, in quotations, like a sit down on stage concert, all of the sound decisions are being made by me. So I'm miking the ensemble and that kind of stuff. And the cameras don't move. They just stay at the same spot.
Right.
The people and the music and sounds create the energy. And it's a different expectation. You know, they don't need you like running around and getting like angles of them, you know.
Sure.
They don't need all of that. So
The clarinet player, like,
yeah, you're like in her face and stuff. So yeah, it's a little bit different, but I think the ideas of framing, the ideas of composition as far as what your shot looks like are pretty much the same.
Gotcha. That's pretty amazing though. Like, because I've dabbled in video, and not even, I can't even say dabbled. I can just say like I wanted to put together a video reel, just like really simple for an audition, and you know, and it can be very tedious, especially if you don't know anything about it. You know, I know when I was putting together my doctoral audition tapes. And that was the first moment when I realized that I didn't have enough information in that area to market myself as well as I could have been marketed, you know. And then also, you know, I started to see limitations with like electronic music, limitations just to learn, you know, so much more than what, you know, I was exposed to. Your media company came out of necessity to market yourself, out of necessity to now we all hit that wall, I think, as marching band techs, people who don't take, because I was adamant about not taking a band director job. You know, I wasn't adamant. It's just like I felt like I wanted to be freer than to be there every day. There is a moment where you have all these schools, all these students, all this income, and then you look at it all and you're like, but I'm dead, you know. I'm writing, I'm doing this, and you know, it's an 80-90 hour week thing, you know, easily, and you have like no energy for anything, or you miss, how many holidays did you miss? You know, a lot, you know. And that was a demarcation point for me as well, is to make that decision to say, this can't be the way that I continue living my life. Now I want to give back 100%. I just have to figure out how I want to do that in a way that's, you know,
it's tough.
It is very tough. It's tough.
You know, and I think for me, I kind of gave myself kind of like a 5-year program to where I was teaching fewer amounts of schools, but I was digging into one school more. Because I think if I see the same students on pretty much a daily basis, I can affect their lives in the future more than me seeing them like one day a week and going to 5 different places. You know, I see more students like that, but am I really digging into who they are and allowing them to see my particular process?
Absolutely.
So at a certain point, I think that's where I hit it. You know, am I really affecting their ability to think, not just giving them musical ideas, but giving them life ideas? And that requires constant communication.
Absolutely. And one of my questions that we all have, that we have to answer in our lifetimes, you know, I wondered, and I think it's great now, you know, there are so many African Americans who are playing and doing really, really well. But I also wondered, could I help that cause? You know, and could I help be a facilitator? Like what does Misha Austin have to give in terms of what I could give back, from what I know? And the question I had to answer was, do I want to give, this to this group of people, or do I want to give this to that group of people? And the answer that I came to is that I want to give it to everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to give it to everybody. But now I have to figure out how I can cover everybody, And so then that became, so I led Ozone Percussion used to be an indoor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now Ozone Percussion looks very different. A lot of young kids, a lot of young, I want to say brown kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say because, but I want to say brown kids, but a lot of young kids who live in areas that they don't get the attention,
Yeah.
and they're great. I learn so much from them every day.
It's cool.
Like,
It's
right.
really
And
cool.
I think I'm going to go teach something, but it's not that. It never was that. So, but anyway, that brings me back to, why I shifted, my focus and what I wanted to do, and moved. I felt like moving to New York because I thought that was the growth that I needed.
Yeah.
That next step.
Nice.
But okay, so last but absolutely not least, I want to hear about Soulful Baby, and I want to know how I can get a T-shirt.
Oh, a T-shirt?
Yeah.
I have a custom T-shirt on here. Okay, so once again, it was just out of necessity. Since I have a 10-month-old, her name is Luna, and we also have an 11-year-old, right? And things. I met her when she was 5, so I've known her for a long time and everything. But just, having a new baby in the house, freshbaby.com. It's not a real website, but so just having a new baby in the house, I wanted to find, things to kind of, entertain her and educate her and stuff like that. And I'm a little bit of an over preparer. So even, before she was here, outside of the womb, I would, look up all this stuff, like how to train her to have perfect pitch and how to train her to, neuroplasticity, all of the things.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, I had to kind of back off. Because I'm like, okay, I just need to love the baby. Like, don't make her into a science experiment.
That's funny.
So,
just love the baby.
I know, just love the baby. Just don't try to make her, Now, the psychology portion in me does do some things, but I'm not. Yeah. Either way, I started looking on YouTube just to try to find, different videos to kind of show her and things, and I did notice that primarily most of the characters that were in videos were either animals or they were sort of Caucasians, which is totally fine. But I think representation of any culture matters.
Sure.
I think it's important for a little white kid in the middle of Oklahoma to see a white basketball player dunking. I mean, it's important.
I do.
And I think it's important for, a high school Marcus to see that the snare drum solo in 2000 Cadets. Tim Green, shout out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and it changed my life.
Favorite shows, by the way.
Really?
2000 Cadets, hands down.
Changed my life.
Changed my life too.
Changed my life. And I eventually met him. Sometimes he actually comes to Atlanta and works with some of the groups here, the Atlanta Drum Academy. Shout out James Rouse. And Steph and I eventually worked with one of the section leaders of that particular group at Mystique. He was one of our snare techs, Tim Maynard. Awesome dude, right? Either ways. So I think representation matters for people to see people who look like them and who act like them and everything. So I was like, well, of course, my daughter's not going to grow up not seeing these, people. So I'm like,
right.
I have the skill set to make my own music. I have the skill set to rally a group of people to help me out with the animations because it's heavily like it's, like Toy Story
Absolutely,
kind of animated. And so, yeah, I'm like, well, if somebody's going to do it, it's me,
I think it's pretty amazing. And let's just loop back and circle back to something that you said about not being intimidated to put yourself out there in the world. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because you have to put your product out there all the time.
You do.
And I tend to like stop that point. I'm like, I'll make it and I'll be like, okay, it's going to, no, we'll just save it. Yeah.
I think, the opportunity has to outweigh the fear that you have, because the fear is always going to be there that people aren't going to like it or that it's not going to be good enough.
Sure.
But I think just the sheer opportunity to provide a service or something for somebody has to overweigh the fear of you not pleasing some listener out there, whatever it is you're doing. So for me, my audience is my daughter. Like, it's going to be her. She already likes some of the songs, thankfully. But, so that's what it is for. Now, thankfully for me, I can put that product out to hopefully help other people who might be looking for that type of material. But and it is scary because it's a lot of lullaby kind of things. I grew up listening to Southern rap, like Outkast and things like that. So I'm more so with my personal music, am a hip hop artist. I'm not a singer, but I'm singing on the whole album, like guitar and playing piano and things like that. Of course, there's some 808s and some traps and that kind of stuff to make it more modern. But it's something that I'm uncomfortable with.
Right.
Like, being the only singer on an album, but it's a kid's album. So I kind of got over it.
Yeah. Well, just to let you know, like, I was at a gig not too long ago, and there were musicians there with young kids about your daughter's age. And this is the conversation that they were having.
Oh, wow.
About YouTube channels dedicated to kids and things that are needed for them. And they were talking about obviously the conversation went right over my head because I don't know any of these little TV shows or YouTube shows. But this is like what they're talking about as like a new something that's very, very much like coveted for them as parents, One, you talked about the length of time, you were talking about how when you wanted to get that, drop all of that information, because one parent was like, okay, a musician, he's a trumpet player, he's like, I'll put it on for an hour so I can get through my scales. And I can get through my scales and, blah, blah, blah. And, daily technique warm-up thing. And, you'll put this video up on, whatever. And it's like what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
it's crazy too. There's so many groups out there and they're very lucrative, by the way.
Okay.
Even now, the top channel of all of YouTube is a kids channel. Ryan's Toy Review.
Yeah. Ryan's Toy Review.
Ryan, it's not even with an S. Ryan Toy Review.
Okay.
And it's crazy. He just reviews toys, and he has his own line of toys now.
Wow.
And things. And he's an Asian American, so it is very important for them to see him. And a lot of the comments you'll see are people who are like, "Ooh, my kid loves this," because they see themselves in there. And stuff. So. Yeah, for me, it's just putting it out there and, because I'm going for longevity. There's certain kinds of things that'll get you a pop in the beginning, and those are like fads. But, obviously people, lullabies and nursery songs don't ever wear out.
Right.
Know, and stuff. So hopefully, 20 years from now, when I'm not even paying attention to that channel anymore, there'll be a canon of work that people will be able to just sit their kids down and they can watch long after I'm not here, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. Just for everybody.
Yeah, just put it out there.
Yeah. Okay. Challenge accepted, Marcus.
Uh-oh.
In 2019, I'm gonna have to put some product out there. I do this, right? Like, I'll record a snare drum solo. And it'll be like one thing in there. I probably am the only person that can hear it. Like one like thing. And they're like, oh, I have to do it again.
I think it's important to let people see you mess up.
Yeah.
And even with me, like, because it's, I don't normally tell people what my New Year's resolutions are, but one of them is to get my drumming YouTube page, because I have a few YouTube pages. But my actual percussion drumming YouTube page is just to put out way more material.
Sure.
Because I think I offer something unique to the community, and it's kind of like a talk through aerobic sort of drum workout. Yeah. And not a lot of people are doing that. There's a lot of licks being put to cool music, that kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh, please do it. Because I just had a FaceTime lesson with a student of mine. And I don't take on many students anymore. And it's not because like I don't want to factory through them, right? So I have this one guy, and I'm an over preparer too, right? So I'm researching this one thing I want to fix in his hands, that he doesn't get warm, he doesn't get a workout, he doesn't. It's like they're coming from this like orchestral percussion background, and so there's not this rudimental like I'm just gonna sit down and do this for like an hour. You know, it's more of like I can conceptualize what's happening. I understand that those are 16th notes, those are 8th notes, but in terms of like getting my hands in shape, we don't have that, you know, that oomph to go do that.
Yeah.
You know? So I try to give him some things that I think are a little bit more fun that he can go and check out to do that. And I don't know that I wouldn't refer him to a drumming aerobic workout.
Yeah.
You know, like literally, like it's basically like you leading them through a warm up.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, various different levels. Some of them I kind of filmed for kind of the middle school kind of thing. One of the ones I filmed the other day is just 20 minutes of buzz roll action, and I barely made it through. You know. Yeah. And, you know, they all have backing tracks and that kind of stuff. So it's,
That's very, okay.
Tell him to hit me up. Marcus Hawkins Music.
I will.
It's on YouTube.
I'm going to let him know. And I'm going to, because in this conversation, each one of these podcasts has been really healing for me. I don't know. I didn't realize that was going to happen, but like, I do think through your conversation, understanding what I offer to the community is important to dive into. And I know that if I'm not turning back around and sharing that with the world, like, oh, what you just did in this practice room with Xenakis, show that to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, don't just put that in a room and like close the door and be like, that's just like a mental workout. Because that's not a mental workout.
It's important.
Like it's important. So to see females, to see African American, to see short people, because I'm short too. So anybody who can drum and inspire, you know. So I say that to say, is there any social media? You've been dropping your website, the whole thing. Social media, anywhere that we can follow you, so that we can keep up with all these wonderful business ventures that you have.
There's not one place for all of them. But if you do want to find me on Instagram, I do post some of my stuff from my media business. It's at Marcus Hawkins Media. If you want to follow me on YouTube, especially for the drumming stuff, you can just find me just by searching for Marcus Hawkins. If you want to find my personal music eventually, even though there's an undercover pre-release of my album kind of out there.
Okay.
It's Morning Hawk, as in like the daytime morning, not as in death morning. So Morning Hawk. If you want to find, of course, the stuff from Soulful Baby, you can pretty much buy that album anywhere that's out there, Soulful Baby Songs. And you can find all of the actual videos on YouTube just by checking out Soulful Baby Songs.
All right. Well, we will definitely be back in touch, because I want to know what's going to happen with this Soulful Baby thing. And also, you know, I'm going to start referring some students to your page.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Tell them to do it.
Especially kids that don't get the marching, you know. That it's really important. I find that a lot of the orchestral percussionists are like, here they've got it, you know, like 100%.
Yeah, the sound.
Yeah,
it's just not the physicality.
The physicality,
yeah.
You know, it's like the balance is just trying to.
Which can be opposite for marching people.
Right.
I mean, can be opposite.
Look, we all have areas to work in.
Yeah.
You know, it's just understanding what they are. Really. So, well, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to release this. And if you wouldn't mind, maybe at the end of this podcast, I'll put like a Soulful Baby or one of your songs.
Oh, yeah.
Just to end this thing out. So thank you so much for being here.
Despite rejection and the worst odds, and it will be better than anything else you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There is no other feeling like that. You will be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire.
This is only the beginning.